Whatever anybody thinks of the United Nations, the fact of the matter, it's an international tribunal that exists, that has influence, and you have to understand how to negotiate it. So we fought years ago to become a non-governmental organization, an NGO, with the United Nations through our office in Europe, our European Center for Law and Justice in Strasbourg, France. And we did that at the time dealing with issues of what I would call religious discrimination. And then, of course, when the religious persecution issues developed really since 9/11 at this significance, they've always been there, but at this significance, we were able to utilize our status to become advocates at the UN, and we've made multiple interventions on multiple cases with multiple lawyers from multiple countries.
The ACLJ would like to bring to the Council's attention the ongoing human rights violation by the Islamic Republic of Iran in the case of Saeed Abedini, who is currently imprisoned for peaceful private expression of his religion. Saeed was arrested and during his visit in Iran to build a government-endorsed orphanage. And though he was tried and convicted as a national security offense, the basis of his crime was his peaceful association and expression with members of his religious community in private homes.
But when Naghmeh inserts herself into the United Nations, she has personalized it. For them, they can ignore a statistic. They can't ignore the face of somebody who's been persecuted.
For nearly a year, the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran has tried to silence my husband, Saeed Abedini, through illegal imprisonment, torture, and threats against our family. Why is he being held? Because he exercised his rights of religious freedom, expression, and peaceful assembly. This past week and today, this Council has called on member states to recognize and uphold these fundamental freedoms. I hope that my presence here today will put a face to those who suffer when a government does not uphold its obligation to protect these freedoms.
Part of the advocacy is, again, it's building that historical record, but it's also being a voice for people who have no voice inside their own country. And then what we can do as a size of organization like we are at the ACLJ, with the voices we're able to put together, when we combine all of our voices and everybody out there who joins our petitions and signs on, shares that with their friends and family and talks about it in church, we can take a government who is not used to having to deal with a strong Christian community, like Iran or Sudan or, the list goes on, Pakistan. And suddenly it's not just their Christian community, now it's the whole world. So it's a multi-pronged attack. I mean, when you're talking about advocacy, we have media advocacy. You use radio, television. There's social media advocacy, which is becoming huge. Facebook, Twitter, other forms of social advocacy, social media advocacy. And then, of course, it's advocacy in the tribunals. Most of these cases end up at the United Nations or some form of United Nations oversight. So you advocate as lawyers or government affairs professionals at the UN.
So the European Center for Law and Justice is accredited at the United Nations, which allows us really incredible opportunity to do what we call multilateral negotiations with countries. So you have situations where maybe the United States or countries in Europe don't have diplomatic relation, but other countries do. So it's an avenue to advocate for both an issue and specific cases, to engage with countries that we wouldn't otherwise have access to ask them to intervene, to step in, to uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's a very invaluable opportunity, one that not everyone gets.
At the ACLJ, we always try to engage these cases in a number of ways. Two of the ones that are the most important, of course, the legal side. That's what we do best. We are legal advocates for these victims of religious persecution. Saeed Abedini, we legally represent the Abedini family in all matters that pertain to the case. But there's another component of this. There's telling the story. At the ACLJ, we try to merge those two things.
Signing petitions is a huge thing because you get attention to a cause when you can say, we have 600,000 people we've heard from. Now what that does allows us to amplify their voice. So it's not just one person speaking in Iowa. It's 600,000 people speaking literally from coast to coast and sometimes from around the globe. So petition signing, petition engagement is a way to express your opinion.
We have a very large reach thanks to our members of people who are engaged in these issues, people who care about these cases. And so more than just doing the legal work, we can also tell the story. We can also reach millions of people with these stories so that they can in turn make a difference.
But we've also encouraged people to talk directly with their members of Congress, directly with their members of the United States Senate, with government leaders. We've asked them to call the White House, these are the things you do. We also do briefs. So when we file an intervention at the United Nations, we will say we're representing 300,000 people or 600,000 people, and that has a big impact.
Petitions are very important, especially to motivate governments to move. And that speaks very powerfully to our government, both at the congressional level and the executive level with our State Department.
In all of these cases, there's a role for us to play. In the case of Saeed Abedini, we represent the Abedini family. In some of these other cases, like Meriam Ibrahim, we do not represent the family, and yet there's a role for us to play. We have raised the visibility of Meriam's case, and the result in that case was a very good one. In the case of Saeed Abedini, there are others who have come alongside us and assisted us as we represent the Abedini family. So no matter the case, there is always a role for each of us to play. And if we're going to achieve results, we've got to make sure that all of us are stepping up and doing what we can.
Our leaders need to be continuously putting the names of these imprisoned Christians who are peaceable people, they didn't cause any problems in their society, are imprisoned because of their faith, because of their religious beliefs. Our leaders need to be keeping their names before the American people and before the world and before the leaders of Iran and other countries.
In Sudan, a court has sentenced a woman to death for renouncing Islam.
The woman was convicted under Sudan's barbaric Sharia law. It forbids women from marrying non-Muslim men. Human rights groups in Western countries, including the U.S., all condemning the sentencing.
Meriam Ibrahim, seen here on her wedding photo, was sentenced to death for apostasy because she married a Christian.
Ibrahim also has a 20-month-old son who stays with her in her prison cell. The court gave Meriam an opportunity to recant her Christian faith, but Ibrahim refused to do so, reportedly telling the court, "I am a Christian and I will remain a Christian."
Well, this is barbaric. There's no other way to describe it. And the crime that she's principally accused of is apostasy. That is to say, leaving Islam and refusing to come back. In America, we call switching religions freedom of religion. And it just demonstrates the risk when Sharia law is implemented to the fullest extent.
The court also ordered that Ibrahim be given 100 lashes for committing zina, Arabic for illegitimate sex, for having sexual relations with her Christian husband, Daniel Wani. Wani is a U.S. citizen.
There's a huge failure on behalf of the United States. The husband, Daniel, had even been trying to get a visa for his wife and child to come to the U.S. prior to this. And there were many complications, and it still hasn't been processed.
If there is any good news, it is that there is still time to save Meriam's life.
Also developing tonight, a big victory for religious freedom. Meriam Ibrahim, the Sudanese woman sentenced to death for being a Christian, is free and even got a blessing from the Pope. The Italian and U.S. governments reportedly working to free the new mother and fly her to safety in Rome last night.
You know, with Meriam Ibrahim's situation, it was clear Sudan is it's a country that supports a lot of terrorism. The U.S. has had a very difficult relationship with Sudan because of their support of terrorism around the world.
We're not practicing law in Sudan. We're not talking to our lawyers in Sudan because it doesn't work that way with some of these governments. So how you work a case when you're not directly representing them or directly in contact with their lawyers is you bring a light to it. You do it through issue advocacy in the media. You do it through governmental advocacy. These are human rights cases. So it's the world's case. It's not necessarily one person's case.
So when people ask you why, with Meriam Ibrahim's situation, what could you do? Well, we weren't the lawyers. We don't have an office in Sudan. We weren't the lawyers on the ground. But we were able to bring hundreds of thousands of people to that story in international outcry, not just from America, but international outcry.